Yeah, they got some work to do, but pretty confident that they're going to be in the mix next year. I've given up on predicting Father Time catching up to Tom Brady. So
John McMullen, Jody McDonald, your Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. Our buddy Rob Motti from the Associated Press going to join us about 25 minutes from now, somewhere thereabouts, and certainly we'll hit Motti with some TB12 questions. TB2B back in Tampa Bay, which I'll take some shots across the bow at Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk, who I'm a big fan of. Well, let me go there. You've been a football guy for how many years now? You've been covering the league?
uh I don't know, 20 something, Jody. I don't like to it's depressing to try to nail it
No, it's
down.
not. Be proud. I've been doing this sports talk stuff for
20,
30 plus
20,
years. So
23, 24
okay,
somewhere.
yeah, I've been doing it longer than you. So don't think that that in any way diminishes what you do on a daily basis. But are you a fan of Pro Football Talk?
Yeah, I probably not. I'd be more no than yes. Too much aggregation, too much. I remember how Mike got popular, and one of the things was, you remember the countdown he used to have of how many players were arrested. He used to do
Arrested?
the
Yeah,
days,
the
and
blotter, police
now,
blotter.
yeah, the police block. And I used to write. I remember I used to write columns about. Look, I thought, and I said it at the time, NFL players would get a bad rap, and I got the FBI statistics, and compared to the general public in their age group, they were arrested less than. But nobody put this context out there, and everybody can get it. I mean, the FBI numbers are public. Um, I thought it was very unfair. Now, a lot of obviously NFL players are very high profile, so obviously it becomes news if they do something bad, understandably so. And there's a lot of context to that in that, and I'm getting off in a wormhole in that, they have the ability and means to not, fall into bad things like maybe the average 23-year
Right.
old kid on the street. So there's a lot of context to it. But I only bring that up because now he's taking this moral high ground and on everything, and he's looking down on people. And I'm like, that's you. I just turned me off. But
Okay,
anyway,
I'm
that's what it
I'm a
is.
big Florio fan. I enjoyed the police blotter, and the reason it was fair was because you don't compare NFL players to John Q. Public. You compare NFL players to NBA players, NHL players, MLB players. Those are in the same socioeconomic position that NFL players are. And yeah, there are more
Well, you see, it
arrested.
isn't there though now, Jody. It's not there. It went away for a reason. He doesn't do it
Yeah,
anymore.
because somebody in the league twisted his arm. I guarantee you
Mm,
that that's the case. Like what is it you like to call them? Information brokers? Yeah,
yeah.
Florio likes to have his fair share of information too to make his site relevant. And someone told him, "Hey, get off the police blotter thing." Would be my guess. I don't know that for a fact, but that would be my guesstimate as to why he did. He's doing much less of that than he's done before. I'm a big fan. I think the site is great. I think his information is great. But every once in a while, Mike, as you just pointed out, gets on a soapbox and hard hammers a point home. And over the last several weeks, Tom Brady to the San Francisco 49ers, if you read Florio, was a fait accompli. That he was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers owe it to Brady to allow. He took a restructured contract to help the team. They can't now hold him to that contract. Well, they sure as hell can, Florio. What the hell are you talking about? He restructured it. He could have said, I mentioned this last night on CBS, the Jason Kelsey contract. Jason was actually under contract, but he had a poison pill in there that the Eagles would have had to pay him $30 million if they just held him to that contract. No, he had to renegotiate it. It was a foregone conclusion. You can put certain things in place so that the team isn't holding you hostage because you've got another year on your contract. He's going to San Francisco. He was so over the top about Brady's coming back and he's going to be a 49er. It was ridiculous. No, Tampa was never letting him walk out the door. If he was going to play football in the NFL in 2022, he was going to do so as a Tampa Bay Buck. And the other, who's that knucklehead former NFL player who's a talk show host in San Diego now?
Oh
Went
yeah.
bent over backwards to say, "Ooh, Tom wasn't happy with Bruce Arians. That
Yeah.
he and Byron Leftwich would put in all the work during the week, and then Arians would come in with a red marker
Yeah,
and
that was a
redo the
story
whole
for
play sheet."
yeah,
What
that was
happened to that? If
that
Brady
was
was so on the different page than Bruce Arians, why the hell's he going back to the Buccaneers now?
that was the story for 48 hours. I forget. Yeah, it was a former offensive lineman. I got to figure out his name is escaping me. And
Yeah,
then,
same here.
you
That's
know,
why I
the
asked you.
Twitter police, went looking. Oh, he used to be a teammate with so and so, so he must be. And then that poor guy is getting crap because they think he leaked it to. Yeah, that was a mess. But
Yeah,
look,
that story worked.
I think Mike's on to something. I'll be fair to Mike. I think he was on to something that Tom would have liked to finish up in San Francisco. I think Tom's wanted to be in San Francisco for a long time, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, we just talked about it with Larry Brown and Paul Pierce and Larry Hughes. We talked about it with Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. Business. I mean, why? And Bruce Arians said that right away. No, we're not. What would that do for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, letting them play for a team in the conference who, by the way, was that close to the Super Bowl, and is obvious if they had a quarterback, and hey, John Lynch had his chance for all the accolades he gets. He should have went and gotten to Tom Brady, and he was the one doing the hand wringing and saying, "Well, he's too old. How could you keep playing at 43 at that level?" Nothing's certain in life, but if San Francisco got Tom Brady when they could have gotten Tom Brady, I'm pretty sure they'd have a Super Bowl, another Super Bowl ring.
And that's fair enough. And again, this is some possibilities, but certainly based on speculation as to what San Francisco did or didn't think. We know what they did. They didn't act upon it. What Tom Brady actually wanted to achieve when he left New England, whether it was San Francisco first and Tampa was a fallback position, nobody knows for sure. And if Florio is getting his information from the Tampa, Brady side, more power to him. If you got a good source, you got to use your good source. But the way that he crafted it, as if the Bucs were just going to allow it to happen, that they were going to kiss Tom Brady goodbye, it'll do more work, Tom. Find out that the Bucs meant what they said when they said, "We'll leave a light on for you." Oh, by the way, Bruce Arians says, "Yeah, well, we would potentially trade him. We'd start the bidding at 5 first-round draft picks for a 44-year-old quarterback." Yeah, that kind of tells me they have no intention of trading him anywhere, and that's why he's back with the Bucs. So even though I'm a big Mike Florio and Pro Football Talk fan, that was a complete swing and a miss on their part. So Brady's back in Tampa. They immediately get Ryan Jensen done as well because Brady reached out and said,
Ali Marpet's not coming back, though. There was a lot of speculation that he would come back, but he's not coming back. So Ali's happy.
Was
I
he
guess.
29 years old and he
Yeah,
retired,
he's
John?
very young. Yeah. Played 7 seasons. Really good player. Yeah. Just made a lot of money. There's more, I wouldn't say it. It doesn't happen a lot. I remember when Chris Borland did this because he was worried about the concussion issues after a great rookie season for San Francisco, by the way. And he just retired and said, "You know what? This isn't worth it." And I'm not going to say there's a ton of those guys, but more and more each year just say, "You know what? I've made enough money. I don't want to be crippled later in my life or dealing with degenerative brain diseases and just walk away." And he's walking away. I'm a little bit surprised. I thought when Tom came back, I thought that would be the next domino pretty quickly. And he's, come out twice now and said, nope, he got married. He's happy. He's made about $40 million. You only need a certain amount of money. So Alex Kapp is a free agent. So it's going to be interesting because, they had some issues protecting Tom in the playoffs mainly because Tristan Wirfs got hurt against the Eagles. That was a devastating. And so did Ryan
And
Jensen.
Jensen got hurt.
Yeah.
They're missing their two best offensive linemen. Yeah, most teams that the Bucks aren't the Philadelphia Eagles, and that's one of the things we don't give enough time to and talk about here on our show or anywhere else for that matter. The Eagles had offensive line injuries all last year, and they survived it because they've got great offensive line depth. Tampa doesn't have that, and Mitchell Marpet next year will be something that they're going to have to adjust.
And Alex Kapp is a free agent, so that's a guy who's going to get paid because there's Cincinnati. Some people have speculated because they're desperate for offensive linemen. They got some work to do, but pretty confident that they're going to be in the mix next year. I've given up on predicting Father Time catching up to Tom Brady. So I forget who it was late last season who said he wasn't going to retire. But I remember the quote. The quote was, "Why would he retire? He's got all the answers to the test." And he did retire, but not really.
No.
And he's got all the answers to the test. So, they've made it easier. Quarterbacks aren't as much danger as they once were. In a different era, maybe you can't play to this level, but they can now because they protect them so much. And you got all the answers to the test. As long as the wife lets you out of the house, why not?
And I had a Brady hater on CBS Sports Radio last night on my phone line. The NFL will put him in a pink shirt so he can't be touched. And I'll go ahead
nobody
and predict,
can be touched. It's not just Tom Brady.
Exactly.
Nobody can be touched.
That's what I said. Oh, and Brady and Belichick, I'll go ahead and predict it right now. That's going to be next year's Super Bowl. I said, well, then why didn't they do that this year? If the NFL is rigging everything and dictates everything and controls the referees and the replay officials, why didn't Brady and Belichick?
Obviously, they wanted the Rams and Bengals in the Super Bowl for their passionate fan bases. And I mean, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you fix it to get the Rams and the Bengals in there? Yeah, that's absurd.
But those are when you open up the phones, that's some of the stuff that you have to deal with, and I did have to deal with it last night. All right, want to jump back to Eagles and the defensive side of the ball. Two key guys, big time star players in the National Football League. One on the Eagles, one should have been on the Eagles. On the Eagles, of course, is Fletcher Cox. A couple more reports around information guides around the NFL that there is interest in Fletcher Cox around the National Football League. There are some teams that have cap flexibility that might not want to overpay for a Vaughn Miller or whatever else because they're okay at the defensive end position, but teams that have big time needs at the defensive tackle position that may be willing to trade for a guy like Fletcher Cox. We know the Eagles explored it leading up to the trade deadline. Trade they wanted wasn't there. Fletcher's relationship and play under his new defensive coordinator certainly improved over the second half of the season after a slow start. Well, we've got a year under our belts. Jonathan Gannon is back as the defensive coordinator. Fletcher Cox is a year further into his contract, which means the dead cap money hit would be that much less this year than it would have been in season last year. How real is the possibility that the Eagles could trade Fletcher Cox this offseason, John?
Pretty real. When this came out, I think it was Ian Rappaport. We talked about information brokers earlier in the show. This stuff comes out for a reason. It's just that. So, Ian's getting the money, getting the information from Fletcher's agent or the Eagles. Somebody wants this information out there and is floating, as I called it, to use a political term, a trial balloon to see what happens. So, it's pretty clear. The Eagles were very close to trading Fletcher Cox at the trade deadline last year. Pittsburgh, Las Vegas were in on it. It nearly got done. And we know he wasn't happy with the defensive scheme early last season. Then when it became clear, you got to make the best of it for the rest of the season, the Eagles took off. Fletcher started playing a little bit better. And everything's copacetic. It's interesting because there's a little bit of a mystery, and I'm still trying to figure out because on paper, it looks like you can't trade Fletcher Cox until after June 1st. Um, Pre June 1st, you'd be taking on 41 million in dead money, which is more than Carson Wentz last year. But the more problematic part was 26 million. You lose in cap space. Now, post June 1st, that goes all the way down to 12.9 million of dead money, which is fine. And you gain 2 million, a little over 2 million in cap space. So from that standpoint, obviously the Eagles would be soft pedaling this. They would wait till after June 1st. And obviously, if you're going to trade the guy after June 1st, you're talking about draft picks in 2023, not 2022. Plus, you also have to remember June 1st, most teams have already made their plans. They populated their offseason rosters. You don't have as much leverage at that point. You got to wait to the trade deadline and everything rolls over. However, there's some evidently, according to a bunch of cap guys, our own Brad Spielberger, we have on this show, Jason Fitzgerald of Over the Cap, have said there's this weird option that's so complicated they can't explain it on Twitter, which goes again to Howie Roseman's ability to manipulate the cap, and also Jake Rosenberg, who people don't know, but is sort of Howie's right-hand man when it comes to contracts. That would make it easier to trade Fletcher Cox before June 1st. But I have heard no explanation. From the numbers that are publicized, they would almost have to trade him after June 1st. But these guys keep saying there's this little thing in there, and it's a small path that evidently they could ignite this option, and it would be easier to trade Fletcher Cox. And I wish I could explain it to you, but they haven't explained it to me, so I can't.
Get who's your buddy? Howie's right hand man,
Brad Spielberger.
No.
Jake Rosenberg.
Jake, well, get him on the phone.
Jake's
Come on, you and Jake are tight. You're like this.
Yeah, Jake's not giving up any of the family secrets.
He's not returning your texts these days, Jake Rosenberg. Oh, that's give it a shot. So I wanted to ask you about Fletcher, and then there was one other move that was made over the weekend that I wanted to get your take on. Khalil Mack was traded by the Bears to the Chargers. I got to be honest with you, John. I don't understand this a little bit. Bears made the big play to get Mack, paid a ton in draft capital a couple of years ago, came in, changed that Chicago defense. The Bears went to the playoffs with Mitch Trubisky as their quarterback 2 years running, which means they made it to the playoffs because of their defense, which means they went to the playoffs because of Khalil Mack.
He was unbelievable when he first got to Chicago. Yeah.
And he had an injured year this year. He missed, I think, 10 games. I think he played in 7 out of 10. He still got 6 sacks. Who led the Eagles in sacks, by the way, this year? Was Josh Sweat?
Javon Hargrave and Josh Sweat tied, I believe, with 7.5.
7.5. So Khalil Mack missed 10 games, 10 out of 17, and he would have only been a sack and a half off the Philadelphia Eagle lead. So when a guy does what he did this week, oh man, that was weird. I got my TV here. I got it on mute. And for some reason, the volume just kicked back in. Listening to Peter Schrager there. I'm sorry about that, folks, but I didn't touch anything. I don't know how that happened. Maybe it was because of Khalil Mack. My TV is trying to tell me, you're right, Jody. The Eagles should have been in on the bidding for Khalil Mack. Johnny Mack keeps telling me they're not playing at the top of the market. And certainly Khalil Mack is there because he's scheduled to make $63 million over the next 3 years, $20 million plus player. I would have loved to see Khalil Mack in Eagle Green. Second round draft pick is certainly the Eagles something they could afford. They've got 3 ones. You trade down a little bit, you cover that second round pick quite easily with maneuvers this year. Do you think they missed out by not getting a guy like Khalil Mack?
Well, he is a difference maker if he's healthy, to say the least. I mean, he is a monster. You talk about that year he had in Chicago, where he's I mean, he was making a play every game. He was, it was a sack, it was a strip sack, it was a forced fumble. I think he led the NFL in forced fumbles. They had so many turnovers that year as a defense. He was the engine to it all. Um, he was just a great, great player. Certainly, if he was not the best edge rusher, certainly in the conversation. Things move fluidly. That was his first year in Chicago, so I'd have to look it up, but it's 2018 or 2019, somewhere in that range. Still has been dominant every year until last year, as he mentioned, where he was out for a bit, and then you start talking about 31-year-old guy, makes a ton of money. From Chicago standpoint, we're not in a position we're not in a position to compete right now, and they probably aren't in a division with Aaron Rodgers, who's going to torture that division for a few more years probably. Do we want to pay this guy when we're going to be? It's this whole modern mindset, Jody. More and more GMs think this way, in that we're not ready to compete. So why are we paying this guy this much money? And then they dump him and they get the draft capital and they say, when we're all ready to compete, we'll have younger players. And even if we are, Khalil Mack will be a descending player by the time we're ready to compete. I don't necessarily agree with it. I say it all the time. But they have Justin Fields. Concentrate on developing Justin Fields. We all have this. The Eagles are having this conversation, right? Cost-effective quarterback on his first contract, and then when he gets to his second contract, you got to pay him a boatload of money. Well, why are you trying to maximize building around Justin Fields? I don't know. This is this chicken and the egg. Maybe they have no confidence in their ability to develop Justin Fields. I don't know. I don't understand this mindset, though. I can tell you that, Jody.
But they bring in a defensive-minded head coach, and their big offseason move is to remove Khalil Mack from the lineup. If they got, and I know quarterbacks are completely different. You look at football players as football players. You really can't. You need to look at the quarterbacks as quarterbacks, and then everyone else as football players. So I know there's a whole different set of rules, but Russell Wilson gets you what Russell Wilson gets you. Russell Wilson in the rankings of quarterbacks is probably not even close to where Khalil Mack is in the rankings. And I'll go defensive players, not even linebackers. I'll go front 7 players. He's that good that he ranks ahead of Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson gets you 2 1s, 2 2s, Noah Fant, and Khalil Mack gets you a second-round draft pick.
Yeah. Well, you'll see, if the Eagles do trade Fletcher Cox, it'll be like, second-round pick. They got offered a second-round pick and a third-round pick last year, but something of that nature. Yeah, I mean, quarterbacks are different, so you set them aside. But it's interesting because the Chargers, who acquired Khalil Mack, they're in that situation right now. Justin Herbert's farther along than Justin Fields. They seem ready to poise, and they go out and they're built. So they're doing what people say you should do. All right, they have the cost-effective quarterback for at least a short amount of time. Let's go get everything around them and try to make a run. Chicago's doing the exact opposite. I don't know. And it's become groupthink. It's become, it used to be outliers. Now you have in, Cleveland with Andrew Berry's a big part of it. The Eagles are a big part of it, to be honest, because they spawned off so many of these guys. This constant manipulation of we're not ready, we're not ready. Very NBA like mentality. I don't agree with it in the NFL. I think Cincinnati proved it. I don't know why people don't look at Cincinnati and say, what? I mean, why you're telling me you're in the playoffs and you're telling me you're not ready to compete? I can't tell you how many times I've heard that from Eagles fans this year. Well, we can't go get Russell Wilson anyway or Deshaun Watson because we're not ready. What? I don't get it, Jody. I don't
As
get
my
it.
buddy Ike Reeves pointed out the other day in WIP, I was in the car listening to him, and he said it, and I said, "No, Ike, I've been saying it. I'm glad a guy like you agrees with me." Who thought the Eagles were ready in 2017? Coming off
Nobody. Nobody.
2016,
I
Doug
was there.
Peterson's first
Nobody.
year, Carson Wentz's rookie season, below 500. Who during the offseason said, well, let's make a push for the Super Bowl this year because we're ready? Nobody. Zippity doodah. The one parade in the history of this town, or at least the last 60 years, 1960. Once. It's happened once. One parade. And it was a year the Eagles weren't, quote unquote, ready to compete. So please stop.
Well, you'll have the one guy out there because there's, the one guy out there predicts them to go 16-0 every year. Now 17-0. So there's the one guy who predicted, they're going to win it all.
Yeah, right.
But not many. Not many.
He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. We are the Mac and Mac Birds 365 guys. We're going to add a third piece to the show. Coming up next, Rob Marty, Associated Press, scheduled to join us here on Birds 365. Stick around.